Welcome! In this video, I'm going to show you how you can use the Graphcool framework to build and deploy GraphQL backend applications. The Graphcool CLI offers many helpful commands to manage your services. I'll start with the init command to bootstrap the local file structure for a new Graphcool service. This now created a couple of files in my current directory. Let's investigate what these files are. The most important one is graphcool.yaml, the root configuration file for my service. Here, I use it to point to the definition of my data model, typically located in a file called types.graphql. Graphcool.yaml also contains information about any integrated functions, such as resolvers for my GraphQL schema or subscriptions that are invoked by asynchronous events. Graphcool.yaml also allows me to specify permission rules to constrain access to my API operations. Types.graphql contains the definition of my data model. In this example, I'm only defining a single type called post that could be the foundation for a simple image sharing application. Every type that's annotated with the add model directive is mapped to the database, and CRUD operations are automatically added to my GraphQL API. To be able to use that API, I need to run the GraphCool deploy command in the root directory of my service. I can deploy the service either to the GraphCool cloud or to a local cluster that's configured with Docker. The deployment makes the service accessible via an HTTP endpoint. Whenever I make changes to my local service definition, I simply need to run the deploy command again to update the running service with the new configuration. Let's now test the API inside a GraphQL playground. With the GraphQL playground, I can run queries and mutations against my API, allowing me to read and update the data in my database. For now, it exposes operations to create, read, update, and delete instances of the post type from my data model. Asking for all the posts in my database currently returns an empty list, so let's change that and create a new post with a mutation. This mutation will create a new post entry in my database, with the corresponding values for the description and image URL fields. I can send it by simply clicking the play button. Going back to the all posts query, we see that the new post is now going to be returned by the server as well. And notice that I can provide further arguments to the query to filter and order the results, as well as to retrieve only a certain chunk of the list to paginate through it. GraphCool services are compatible with all major frameworks and GraphQL clients. Let's try the React and Apollo Quick Start example that you can find in the GraphCool examples GitHub organization. I just downloaded the code for the example project, which is a simple image sharing application and based on the same data model that I just used for my GraphCool service. All I need to do to get it up and running is replacing the placeholder for the API endpoint with the actual HTTP endpoint of my GraphQL API. After I started the app in my terminal, it now displays the posts that it fetches from my GraphCool service. I can also add new posts through the UI that invokes the same create post mutation that I just used in the playground. The GraphCool framework has a simple and flexible template system that allows to quickly pull in predefined functionality into your service. All templates can be found on GitHub. Next, I want to add email password-based authentication to my app. To do so, I can simply use the add template command in the CLI and provide the path to the template on GitHub. All this does is download the template code from the GitHub repository and add commented lines to my service configuration file. In this case, it added a new user type to my data model that has fields to store email and password of authenticated users. The command further added 3 resolver functions to my API that take care of creating new users, authenticating existing users, and checking whether a user is currently logged in. After uncommenting the lines that were added by the template and installing the dependencies for the newly added functions, I can deploy the service again in order to apply these changes. This now added 3 more operations to my GraphQL API, taking care of the authentication workflow. Heading over to the playground again, I can test the sign-up user mutation that was added by the template. I can provide an email and a password and send the mutation to create a new user. In the selection set of the mutation, I can also ask for an authentication token that can be used to authenticate all subsequent requests that are made against the API. To learn more about the functionality the GraphCool framework provides, check out the examples section in our main GitHub repository. Each example is self-contained and walks you through a specific use case in only a few minutes. Learn how to configure permission rules, wrap a REST API, integrate real-time functionality with subscriptions, or implement an API gateway on top of GraphCool's CRUD API. This is it for this video. If you have any questions, check out our documentation or ask your question in the forum.